Welcome to the Red Dad Podcast,
where we'll be exploring the trials and triumphs of being a father, men's mental health,
and any other topic that inspires us to be rad.
Through a series of interviews, your host, Jace Kelly, will be discussing and discovering the best ways to become a rad dad. Now your host, Jace.
All right, welcome to episode 3 of the Rad Dad Podcast. I have the original Rad Dad, my dad, on today. So thanks for coming out.
It's a good opportunity. Thanks for giving it to me.
So this is episode 3. We have a few more scheduled, and then hopefully by episode 5 we'll officially be launched. We'll be on YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, pretty much anywhere you can find podcasts in video or audio format. So just to introduce you, you're a father of 5, my dad for 30 years, and you've been an educator for how many years?
37 years.
So 37 years an educator, and then just to kind of go down your resume, people call you master.
No, they don't. Oh, I guess they do in martial arts.
You are now a master in martial arts. They've called you principal, teacher, gardener. You've held leadership positions in the church. So your resume is long. You've worked with a lot of youth in your life. So just to start off, I want to start from the beginning and maybe just have you talk a little bit about how you were raised. With growing up with Grandpa Kelly, and maybe like a favorite childhood memory.
Okay. I don't know if this is my favorite childhood memory, but it's my earliest childhood memory. And Grandpa Kelly, he was a cowboy through and through, and he raised me as a cowboy. And when I don't know, it's my earliest memory, so I was 3 or 4. He put me on a big horse all alone, and the horse ran. And it was out of control. And I fell off the horse, and I was laying there crying, and my dad came, and I remember him wiping the tears from my eyes with leather gloves and then catching the horse and putting me back up on the horse. And that taught me right then at a very young age that no matter what, no matter where, if you have adversity or anything, you get back on the horse. That's just sums up my whole childhood. Get back on the horse.
Yeah. So you grew up with horses and livestock, right?
Uh-huh.
So is that where you learned hard work, is taking care of those animals?
There's no question. I grew up on 2 dairies. We had 2 different dairies. We had to get up in the morning. We had to milk them twice a day. We had hay, hauled hay, changed sprinklers. At one point, we had a ranch of over 800 acres in hay, and just to change the sprinklers was 4 hours a day of work. There's no such thing as 8 to 5. It was more like 8 to 8. Well, it was more like 6 or 7 a.m. in the morning or 5 a.m. in the morning till the sun went down, and even after that, get 6 hours of sleep. A lot of times we baled hay at night, so we'd work all night and go get a couple hours of sleep and then work all day.
So how did you ever complain, and if you did complain about the work, how did Grandpa Kelly handle that? Or were you just like, you didn't?
I didn't complain. It was just the way it was.
Yeah.
We had nothing to compare it to. That's just how it was. That's how I was raised.
So you didn't, was everyone in your community kind of like that? Like you didn't have friends that didn't have to do that stuff, or, you know?
When I grew up, and Heber's changed quite a bit. I grew up in Heber, and it's changed more than quite a bit. It's changed a lot. But when I grew up in Heber, it was a cowboy town. All my friends were cowboys. They all had farms. They all had ranches. I worked on their farms and ranches. They worked on mine. That's just how it was.
And so during that time, Grandpa was also a teacher and a coach, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah, he taught in Salt Lake at Olympus High School. So he commuted an hour there and an hour back every day. And yes, he coached and taught for 30 years.
So in your teenage years, what did you want to be when you grew up? Because you kind of had this cowboy lifestyle. Your dad was an educator. Did you have thoughts of what you wanted to be?
I don't know in my early teenage years if I put a lot of thought into that, but I put a lot of thought into it obviously when I was in high school. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I wanted to be a coach, just like my dad, particularly a wrestling coach.
And so was education kind of the avenue for you to be able to make money and still coach?
Well, education at that time, I guess that's a tough question because educators didn't make a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
And I did it for love of being a coach. But obviously, to be a coach, you had to be a teacher. And so, yeah, I went to college and got my teaching degree, went to Utah State and got my teaching degree. And that was a big part of it. And I love teaching. I found out that I love teaching as much or more than I love coaching.
So take me through that process of graduating, getting your first job. Where in that timeline did you get married? And where did you end up for your first job?
Okay. I met Mom at Utah State when I was a junior, and we got married between our junior and senior years, and we lived on the ranch in Stone, Idaho. And I worked all summer, and then I went to school all winter. My dad, it was kind of the Kelly plan or the Kelly scholarship. I didn't get paid anything to work in the summer. Here I am, a 20-something-year-old guy, not getting paid anything. But my dad paid all the tuition and our housing and expenses during the winter. So it was it was a good deal for me. Mm-hmm. I met Mom at a dance in December of my junior year, and by April we were engaged, and by July we were married. We didn't have a long engagement. I didn't want a long engagement. I don't know that she did. We were married in July, and we spent that last summer, we spent 2 summers in Stone, Idaho working on the ranch. And then my senior year of college, during the spring, I sent out over 60 resumes and to every school district in Utah. I sent a resume and a letter of introduction. And I was looking for a job, and I was looking for a job anywhere. It didn't matter where. I just wanted a job teaching and coaching. And that resume produced quite a few interviews. And one time I was actually, and when you go to an interview back in them days, you go with a shirt and a tie and dressed up. Well, I was at a track meet at Juab High School, and I was watching my brother run. And the principal at Juab High School come up, and he come up and found me in the stands. And anyway, long story short, I knew the coach at Juab High School because I had refereed some wrestling matches. And that coach pointed me out in the stands, and the principal come up and basically took me on a tour of the school and offered me a job on the spot. And so I took that job right off the bat. And that was a perfect fit for me because it was a small town, a lot like Heber. It was a good fit. And so we moved in August of that year. After I graduated from college, we moved in August, and we moved to Juab, to Nephi. And yeah.
So did you have a specific sport that you wanted to coach, or?
Well, absolutely, football and wrestling. I wanted to be a head wrestling coach. I became a track coach also. And but yeah, there was no question I wanted to coach wrestling and football. And the first 2 years, I was an assistant wrestling coach, and that was good. I wasn't ready to become a head coach. I learned a lot from Coach Broadhead as his assistant for 2 years. And then after that, I became the head coach and was the head coach the rest of the time of my 10-year plus coaching career.
So you were pretty young when you became head coach.
Yeah, probably like 24.
So how was that an adjustment for the athletes, or how did you gain the athletes' respect being so young?
I did it with them. They knew that I would not ask them to do anything that I wouldn't do. So I lifted with them. I ran with them. We did crazy things like when it was legal to practice, we'd practice like at midnight. We'd have midnight madness and practice at midnight.
Yeah.
Just crazy stuff. And they knew that I wouldn't ask them to do anything that I wouldn't do.
So what did sweet Christine Kelly from Centerville, Utah think of all the madness of the sport of wrestling? How did she handle that, and you coaching and everything?
It was hard for her. It was really hard for her when we had Tyler, your oldest brother. She'd bring him to the wrestling meets and watch. But it was hard because I was gone a lot.
Yeah.
I was gone a real lot. When you were born, the day you were born, I was there when you was born, and then basically that morning I said goodbye to her and went to a region wrestling tournament. And so that's just kind of how things were. And she was very supportive. I couldn't have had a coaching career. I couldn't have done any of the things that I've done or accomplished without her support. She never gave me any problems or any trouble or complained. She was very supportive in my careers.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I've kind of made this observation in, working with various coaches and different sports and stuff. But my observation is that wrestling coaches are a different breed. They have kind of a unique relationship with their team. They're more intertwined with their team's lives, and dare I say they have a bigger impact on the athletes than any other sport in high school. What do you think about that?
I think it's true. Wrestling is a more intimate sport. You're handling each other's bodies. If athletes are cutting weight, you're literally telling them what to eat and when to eat. And so you're really involved with the athlete's life. Because of it's so intimate of a sport, and because you're so involved with their lives, they open up to you and tell you what's going on. You knew a lot more what's going on than regular coaches. So, yeah, I think that wrestling coaches have a higher impact upon athletes than other coaches.
Cool. So, something I like to brag about to friends and stuff when we're talking about athletics is that my dad was my little league coach in every sport I did. All growing up, you were my coach up until 9th grade.
Yeah.
Right, when I went into high school athletics. Do you ever feel like it was hard to draw the line between coach and father?
Yeah, I don't know where that line ever ended.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a tough one. And so I guess the answer to that's, yeah, I don't have a long answer. I tried to treat you I tried to be fair. I really tried to be fair and not play you more than other people on the team. I tried to give everybody the same playing time. I tried to treat you the same as everybody else. In fact, I expected more of you. I expected you to work harder. I expected you to do things that I didn't expect the other athletes. So I guess that's where the line was drawn, is I expected more from you. I had higher expectations of your behavior, your sportsmanship, your training. I just had higher expectations.
Yeah. So Katie and I have had this discussion a few times throughout our marriage, but Katie, my wife, she didn't grow up in a family that really pushed athletics. It was like, if you want to try something, you can. And then on the other end, you have the Kelly household where, it's pretty polar opposite. We were required to get our black belts at a young age, and then athletics maybe weren't much of a choice oftentimes because you pushed us to be the best. I mean, we spent our summers traveling to wrestling tournaments. I was a 3-sport athlete in high school. Looking back on that approach with athletics, do you have any regrets? Is there anything you would change?
That's a tough question. I like what we did. I never made you do it. It's just something we did. It's something, and I guess that's when you grew up and all the other brothers and that grew up. They just knew that we went to wrestling camp in the summer.
Yeah.
They knew we went and wrestled in the summer. They knew that during the spring we wrestled freestyle, and it was just part of their life. I guess probably the biggest regret I have is I didn't push academics hard enough. I wish I had pushed academics harder with all the brothers. I guess that's my biggest regret. Although it was expected in the Kelly household to have above a B average.
Yeah.
But looking back on that, I should have had probably higher expectations. I should have required more math of you guys. I didn't require enough math, and that's because I hated math.
Yeah.
And I still hate math, but math is one of the things that makes the world go round, and I didn't require enough math of you guys. And I guess my biggest regret is I didn't do academics enough. Although academics were an important part of what we were doing.
Yeah.
I would do it more.
So I'll ask you this question and have you answer it, and then I'll tell you my thoughts on it. But I remember probably junior high, maybe early high school, I was like begging for a 4-wheeler because, we have our family cab and we didn't have 4-wheelers or dirt bikes growing up. And I was like, Dad, we got to get a 4-wheeler. And your answer was, look, we spend our money on wrestling tournaments. We can't get a 4-wheeler because our money goes towards those summer trips and those wrestling tournaments. Was that trade-off worth it?
I don't know. Was it?
I would have to say yes. The reason behind that is because the work ethic I learned mainly through wrestling, because that was the main sport in our household, has brought me to a position in my life where I can buy a toy now. I can buy a dirt bike. That work ethic has brought me to that position. So, the trade-off is worth it. The lessons we learned and the memories we made are definitely worth it.
And we never wanted for anything. We grew up in a pretty nice house. We grew up on a nice yard.
Yeah.
Had a nice garden. So we never wanted for anything. But we weren't flush either. We didn't have extra cash and extra money to go buy. It was either go spend money on wrestling or buy a four-wheeler. Yeah. It was a choice. We didn't have money to do both.
Right. Yeah. Just to kind of wrap up this little part about wrestling and athletics and stuff, now being a father, and getting excited to take Lincoln to wrestling duels and get him started in sports. Every time I go and watch wrestling, I'm reminded of how much of a commitment it is. And I go back and forth like, man, do I really want my kids to wrestle? Because if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. Like I was raised, you're going to be committed to the sport and you're going to learn and grow. And me as a father, I'll be right there with Lincoln or my other boys if I have them, So what would your advice be to young dads that are kind of on the fence about putting their kids in athletics and making that commitment?
Well, the culture of athletics is so fraught with winning and losing. Too much, actually. But kids' self-esteem is based on winning and losing. Let's face it, it hurts when you lose. And you got to win more than you lose. You learn a lot from losing. There's nothing wrong with losing. You actually probably maybe learn more about yourself and learn more about when you lose and you work harder to win than when you win. But at the same time, you got to win more than you lose, because if you don't, it affects your self-esteem, and it affects your work ethic, it affects everything. So you want to win. And if you want to win, then you got to be all in. You can't do something half-assed and expect to win. You just can't. It don't matter whether it's martial arts, it don't matter if it's wrestling or football or any kind of athletic sport. You can't do it halfway. You got to be all in, or you're not going to win unless you're some rare gifted athlete. And they're out there. There's athletes out there that don't have to work as hard. They have to work to a certain standard, but there's athletes out there. But unless you're one of those people, and there's very few of those around, you have to work hard.
One more. I gotta tell this quick story about wrestling because it just came to my mind. It's one of my favorite stories. I think it was 8th grade, junior high state. One of the placing matches, I went out and wrestled the match. I ended up beating the kid, and I came off the mat, and you were so frustrated, and you kind of started getting after me. And I'm like, I won the match, and you said, but you didn't try your best, and that clicked so hard for me at that younger age. That winning isn't always the most important thing. I didn't try my best. So now being self-employed and working for myself, I have to have that discipline day in and day out. Like, am I just sitting around kind of making do with what I have and letting things flow, or am I actually putting in a full effort? Am I winning, or am I conquering? So that just popped into my head. So just to kind of turn the conversation to a different subject, I want to get your thoughts and hear the quick story about you starting the martial arts studio, because from what I understand, at that time in your life, you were into your career, probably in school, getting a master's degree. You had 5 kids at the time, and you decided to open a martial arts studio on top of all that. Do you want to just go through why you did it and kind of the process and the risks you took?
Well, why I got involved with martial arts in general was because of Tyler. During his first few years growing up, right up through his first grade year, I was gone. I was in a bishopric, I was coaching wrestling, and I was getting a master's degree. And I was gone. And I hadn't spent any time with him at all, any quality dad time. And then I remember him coming home after he I don't know, he got in a fight or anything, an altercation, but he come home and remarked that this kid was a bully. And I'd done some martial arts in high school. I dabbled in Shotokan karate. And so I always wanted to do martial arts. And so I decided, you know what, we're going to sign up. I'm going to do this with him. This is something we're going to do together. And so I went and signed up, and we became black belts. And then when we became black belts, I just always wanted to climb and be the best, I guess. And there was always a drive in me to, like you said, conquer. And the next step, obviously, was to become a martial arts instructor. And so we had a...
Was that, sorry to cut you off, but was that
okay.
Was that immediate? Like as soon as you got your black belt, you're like, the next step's to become an instructor. Or was there like, you got your black belt and you're like, great, that's it?
I knew I wanted to be an instructor clear back when I was a blue belt.
Okay.
That was a given. That was just a matter of time.
Okay.
That I wanted to be an instructor. So we had a little shop, a little 1,000 square foot shop out back, and I think we took out a home equity loan. We spent about $10,000 or $15,000 remodeling it, and we turned it into a karate studio. And for 10 years, we started that in 1997, that karate studio. And for 10 years, we ran it out of the house, just word of mouth. We were making good money because we had no overhead. So just by word of mouth and no overhead, we had around 40 students. And so I always wanted to go down on Main Street and do something big and do something, because I'm competitive. It was the next step. I got a karate studio. Now I want to make a big karate studio.
Yeah.
And so I was dabbling with that. And I was principal at a school at the time. And anyway, Tyler was home from his mission, and he had gone out back east to sell. I can't remember what he sold. Alarm systems, whatever. He hated it, and he called me several times during that summer and said, "Dad, I want to do martial arts. I want to do martial arts studio." At the time, he was a second degree black belt. Well, no, he was still a first degree. He was still a first degree black belt, but he with the summer, just that time, he had thought, and obviously he grew up on martial arts from the time he was 5 till then, when he was 20-something. He'd grown up on it, and he wanted to do it. And so that summer, I decided that we were going to take it down on Main Street, and we did.
So can you take me through like a day in those 10 years that we had the studio in the shop behind the house? Take me through a day in the life of Joe Kelly. Like, what was your schedule when you were teaching and developing the business?
I'd get up, 5 o'clock in the morning, get ready, go to school, try and be at school by 7:30, teach all day, come home about 3:30, teach martial arts till about 8 o'clock at night, and then come in, get ready for bed, go to bed, and get up the next day and do it all over again. And that's what I did.
And growing up, you required all of your kids to be a black belt.
That's correct.
We all grew up in the studio. We taught. I think all of us taught a little bit, after we got our black belts, and then all the boys in the family wrestled and also got their eagles.
Mm-hmm.
So, where do you feel is that balance of how much you ask of your kids, and does it change with each kid?
Well, it depends on what you're asking. I saw in martial arts some character development things that were not in wrestling. And so the wrestling and the martial art combo was a great combo. I was developing kids. I wasn't teaching karate. I wasn't wrestling. I wasn't coaching Little League football. I was developing you guys. That was the bigger goal. That was the ultimate goal, was to develop you guys and make you good young men and good citizens. And so, yeah.
So as I get more and more into adulthood and fatherhood, I see a lot of really talented former athletes that I know, either not putting their kids in the athletics or giving in and pulling them out because the kid just wants to quit. What would your advice be to a father that is struggling to push a kid to continue in athletics?
Well, athletics isn't the only thing out there. There's lots of things. I think a kid should be good at something. Mm-hmm. They can be exceptional at playing a musical instrument. They can be exceptional in dance. They can be exceptional in martial arts or wrestling or football or whatever. It doesn't matter. Every kid needs something that they can be exceptional at, that they can hang their hat on, and that they can be proud of and feel good about. And that helps develop character and helps develop their self-esteem. And so I don't know that I have any advice other than if it's too much and you can't do it, find something else that you can have your child be exceptional at.
Yeah, that's a great point. I guess I shouldn't have said athletics, but I do agree with you that kids need to learn and develop and be good at something. So you've been in education for 37 years. You are now an elementary school counselor. What changes have you seen in this age group of elementary school kids, as far as their mentality, their ability to learn? I guess I'm not wording this very well, but I wanna get your thoughts on how much kids have changed with the influx of social media and the internet.
Well, it's hard to say because I've only been an elementary counselor for 4 years, so it's hard to say, well, in 30 years, elementary kids have changed this way. But COVID had a huge impact academically. People don't realize the academic impact that COVID had on kids. We have third and fourth graders now that can't do first grade work. That's pretty typical. So COVID had a huge impact. Kids these days have a lot more trauma. There's just more trauma out there. I don't know if it's due to social media or what it's due to, but when I'm talking trauma, I'm talking abuse, I'm talking broken homes, I'm talking divorce. They are traumatized a lot easier, and consequently, what I run into is anxiety. I have kids that they come to school, and a lot of them just can't take it. They just can't take the pressure. They can't take leaving home. They can't take a test. They have anxiety. And I think that anxiety piece and being more traumatized, more mentally unstable, that's what I've seen.
So do these parents have the ability to help their kids in an effective way because they didn't experience that growing up?
That's a good question. Most of those parents are doing the best that they can. There are some that obviously are involved with substances and doing things in and out of jail and doing things they can't. But I think most of those parents are doing the best they can. I just think a lot of it's just the way that things are now. It's just our society is so dysfunctional, and we'll look at it. 50% of marriages end in divorce. 50%, 1 in 2. And so you got a single mom or a single dad who's doing the best they can, but you got a little girl who her dad won't see her. She won't see her dad, and he doesn't want to see her. And how do you deal with that? How does she deal with that, a little 10-year-old girl? And the mom's doing the best she can, and maybe she gets married to a guy, and he's a stepdad. He's doing the best he can, but it's not her dad. And so I think divorce is a huge thing. Yeah.
So I know you've seen this in the older grades, but in the younger grades, do you feel like some of these students enjoy going to school because it's their escape? It's where they can see their friends and their teachers and feel accepted outside of the home?
Like I said, in elementary school, there's a lot of anxiety, and I'm sure there's a lot of kids that go to school that you got to realize there's a lot of kids that go to school that school lunch is the only meal they get that day.
Yeah. Mom
and dad work or because of poverty in the home or because of a lot of reasons, and I work in an area where there's fairly high poverty. Hot lunch is the only meal that those kids will get. And so is it an escape for them? I don't know that they're that socially developed in second, third, fourth grade. By the time they get in 6th and 7th and 8th grade and they start to have peers and they start to have friends, they start to interact and do activities at school and that, then definitely that could become a time where it is more escape.
So you spent at least half of your educational career at Landmark High School. Can you just explain what Landmark is?
Well, explaining my career, I got out of coaching and I became the counselor at Landmark for 4 years. And then I decided to become an administrator, and I went and got another master's degree, went away in administration, and then eventually the superintendent wanted me to come back and be the principal of Landmark High, and so I ended up being the principal of Landmark High for 14 years. So I actually spent like 17 or 18 years at Landmark High School.
Okay.
But it's an alternative high school for kids that they're not making it into regular high school. For every kid, there's a reason, there's a story. A lot of kids are in trouble. A lot of kids have drug problems. A lot of kids come from broken homes. A lot of kids have academic problems and they're behind academically. Every kid has their own story. But basically, Landmark's a place where those kids come and try and get an education.
So here on the Rad Dad podcast, our main focus is talking about the trials and triumphs of being a father. I'm sure you saw a lot of trials and triumphs in your students at Landmark. What did you do, or how did you handle not bringing those emotions and those trials home into your home?
I don't know. Did I bring it home?
I don't know.
Well, you ought to know. Did you feel like I brought it home?
I don't remember any specific.
Well, then I must have been somewhat successful.
Yeah.
I've always been blessed, even now as an elementary school counselor. Maybe I'm a hard-hearted person, I don't know. But I've always been blessed to leave work at work. I wasn't able to do that when I was coaching. Coaching is a whole other discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't able to do that. But as a principal, pretty much, and as a counselor, I've been able to leave work at work. And that has made a big difference.
I feel like that's such an important skill, being able to do that, because it creates balance in your life. Do you feel like you've done a good job balancing home life, supporting your kids in their endeavors, and then work and career?
It's a great question. I've had my ups and downs. I've had bad times. I've had good times. Right now I feel very balanced as a grandfather and as a father. There were some times, a period of time, I lost that balance. I think that everybody goes through phases like that. Nobody's perfect.
Yeah. So I'm just going to do some rapid fire questions to wrap this up, and you just shoot your answer.
Okay.
What's better, being a father or grandfather?
Being a grandfather, because you can send them home with their parents.
Okay. As a father, what is a lesson that...
I was just joking on that last one.
I believe you.
But it's a joke. Being a father is awesome. And you're always a father. I'm still a father to you.
Yeah.
You're still always a father. So
Yeah.
anyway, go ahead.
I've heard a lot that being a grandparent is awesome. So.
It is.
Another question, what's a lesson that you've learned as a father that you maybe wouldn't have learned outside of fatherhood?
That's a good question. The word that comes to me is compassion. Having compassion on my kids. And I, that there were times that I was not so compassionate when I was coaching. And I made some mistakes when I coached you guys. But the word compassion and learning to be compassionate with my kids and understanding and loving, I think, would be the answer.
What do you feel like was easier, the first 10 years of fatherhood or your last 10 years of fatherhood?
Well, definitely, the last 10 years have been a lot easier. It was hard being a father, and I don't even want to open up this can of worms, but in 2008, your mom got cancer. So for a period of about 5 years, I was the mom and the dad, and that was a tough time.
So I want you to share some advice for young fathers going through hard times and that are just worried about raising their kids in such a crazy world right now. What would you tell that young father?
I'd tell him, do everything you can to save your marriage. That's like number one. If I see anything as an elementary counselor that affects kids, it's divorce. So I'd say do everything you can to save your marriage. And then after that, spend a lot of time with your kids doing something, you know, and spend time with your kids. Don't just bring work home and do that. Don't be self-centered and worried about playing video games by yourself. But whatever you do it with your kids. If you're going to go fishing, take your kids fishing. Spend time with your kids.
So something I admire about you is that you've always continued to educate yourself, and you've always had that desire to learn more. You're actually in the process of getting, is it your third master's?
Uh-huh.
And how old are you?
61.
So you're 61 and you're getting your third master's degree. What impact has that made, always continuing your education throughout your life?
I just love education. I love academics. I love learning. I think I've grown as a person. I'm a different person now than I was that young teacher that came out at 22 years old, from college.
Yeah.
It's just been a growth process, and I like the process of growing. I like the process of being challenged cognitively, and I just like that growth process.
All right, and last question, top 3 books to read. Top 3 books.
Like novels or self-help books?
Whatever you want.
Definitely number one. I don't know if it's number one, but one of the big 3 would be How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's a great book. It's a classic. Number 2 would be The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And I think that book gives you a chance to balance and shows balance and how to be balanced as a father and as a human being. And probably the 3rd one would be a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, who spent years in a concentration camp and talks about his experiences there and kind of gets more into the meaning of life and what life's about.
Awesome. I know you're a big-time reader, and that's something we share, talking about books and sharing different books with each other. So thank you for those suggestions. Thanks for coming on. It's been an awesome conversation to have with you. So maybe in the next months or years we can come on again and see how much we've both grown and just enjoy another conversation. So thank you.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.